Opening shot. Samantha sitting comfortably, looking confident. Hi, I'm Samantha Mitchell, and at Net 4 I finally saw justice served in the most unexpected way. For years, my family told everyone I was a failure, a disappointment who could never measure up. They had no idea I had just been appointed chief of surgery at one of the most prestigious hospitals in the country. I kept my success a secret, tired of their dismissal. Then came the day my sister was hospitalized. As I sat quietly beside her bed, enduring their usual cold treatment, a nurse walked in, bowed slightly, and said, "Hello, Chief of Surgery. Before I tell you how my entire family went pale, learning who I really am, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had someone underestimate your potential." Cut to flashback. Younger Samantha narrating. My love affair with medicine began when I was 7. My grandfather needed heart surgery. I remember sitting in the waiting room clutching a children's book about the human body. When the surgeon came out to speak with us, I was mesmerized. He seemed like a superhero in a white coat. In that moment, I knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. "I'm going to be a doctor," I announced proudly on the car ride home. My father glanced at me in the rearview mirror and chuckled. "That's a nice dream, Sammy, but it takes a special kind of person to become a doctor. It's very difficult." Beside me, my sister Emily, only 5 at the time, declared, "I want to be a doctor too." "Now that I can see," my mother said, reaching back to pat Emily's knee, "you've got the brains for it, sweetheart." That was my first taste of the family dynamic that would define my childhood. Emily was the golden child, bright, charismatic, and, according to my parents, destined for greatness. I was the steady, reliable one who should set realistic goals. Cut to family dynamics, montage. My father, Richard Mitchell, was a business executive who valued status and appearances above all else. He'd built himself up from middle-class roots and was determined his family would reflect his success. My mother, Diana, was a former beauty queen who once dreamed of becoming a model before settling for marriage and motherhood. Together, they created a household where achievements were measured by how impressive they sounded at cocktail parties. Emily learned early to play to this audience. She was theatrical and demanding of attention, quick to showcase her accomplishments, and just as quick to make excuses for failures. I was quieter, more determined, less interested in the spotlight, traits my parents interpreted as a lack of ambition. By the time I was 10, the pattern was firmly established. Emily's birthday parties were elaborate affairs with professional entertainment and custom cakes. Mine were afterthoughts, usually celebrated with a store-bought cake and whatever gifts my parents hastily purchased. When I brought home straight A's in middle school, my father nodded absently. "That's nice, Samantha." When Emily managed to pull her grades up from CS to BS, they took her out for a special dinner to celebrate her remarkable improvement. I learned to find validation elsewhere. Cut to Samantha studying alone, focused, while my parents were busy attending Emily's dance recitals and school plays. I buried myself in science books. I dissected frogs in the garage, conducted simple chemistry experiments, and watched medical documentaries when everyone else was asleep. I was building my foundation brick by brick, even as my family assumed I was simply passing time. My saving grace came in the form of Mr. Daniels, my high school biology teacher. He caught me staying after class one day, examining slides under the microscope. "You've got a good eye," he said, peering over my shoulder, "and better technique than most of my senior students." It was the first time an adult had recognized my potential. Mr. Daniels became my mentor, providing advanced reading materials and writing me a glowing recommendation for college. "You're going to make an exceptional doctor someday," he told me when I was accepted to pre-med. "Remember me when you're changing the world." I nearly cried. Someone believed I could do it. Cut 2. Family reaction to college acceptance at home. The response was predictably lukewarm. My father frowned at my acceptance letter. "That's a tough road, Samantha. You know most pre-med students don't actually make it to medical school, right?" "I know, Dad, but I'm going to be one of the ones who does well." My mother interjected, "At least you'll have a good education to fall back on when you decide on something more suitable." They agreed to pay for my education, but their subtle undermining continued. Every phone call included questions about whether I was still enjoying my classes, as if medicine were a phase I'd eventually outgrow. Every holiday brought comments about how tired I looked, how maybe I was pushing myself too hard for something that might not be meant to be. Meanwhile, Emily thrived in the attention department. If I mentioned an interesting lecture, she'd interrupt with a story about the party she'd gone to where she'd met the son of a hospital administrator. My parents would immediately pivot to her tale, relieved to escape the boring details of my academic pursuits. By senior year, I'd learned to keep my dreams close to my chest. I stopped sharing my achievements, my hopes, my plans. I've built a private world where I could nurture my ambition without the constant weight of their doubt. Cut to Samantha back. In present day, the night before I left for college, I sat alone in our backyard, looking up at the stars. I made myself a promise. Someday, I would be undeniable. Someday, I would force them to see me. And now, at 34, after years of relentless hard work, I am that person, the chief of surgery. If you've ever been underestimated or told you're not enough, I want you to know, keep building your foundation brick by brick. Keep going, because the moment your light shines brightest, they won't be able to ignore it. Closing shot, Samantha smiling warmly. Have you ever had someone doubt your potential? Share your story in the comments below. If you found inspiration in mine, please like, subscribe, and join this community where we celebrate resilience and success against the odds. Thanks for listening. Remember, your worth isn't defined by others. It's defined by the passion and perseverance you carry within. **. I never realized how many years and how much struggle it would take before that moment finally came. Being accepted into Princeton's pre-med program should have been a reason to celebrate. But my parents responded with a mix of surprise and worry. *Princeton, my father said, raising his eyebrows over his glasses. That's going to be expensive, Samantha. Are you sure this is the path you want? There's no shame in starting at community college if you're not completely sure. I held my acceptance letter tightly and said, I'm certain. I also had a partial scholarship. Well, that helps, my mother said, though her tone suggested it wasn't enough. We just don't want you to take on debt for something that might not work out. Eventually, they agreed to cover what my scholarship didn't, but every tuition payment came with subtle reminders of their sacrifice and warnings about how tough the journey would be. My father often sent me articles about how many pre-med students drop out and the exhausting lifestyle of medical residents. I threw myself into my studies with a focus that surprised even me. While other freshmen explored campus life, I built relationships with professors and secured research positions. Missing parties didn't bother me. Every perfect exam score was its own reward, and every positive evaluation from a professor was another step toward my future. In my sophomore year, my sister Emily announced she wanted to study medicine too. Our parents' reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. Like father, like daughter, my dad said. Even though he had no medical background, you've got the Mitchell determination. They never mentioned that I was the one who had paved this path first. When Emily was accepted to Rutgers with a modest scholarship, my parents threw her a party with extended family and friends. At the celebration, my uncle patted my shoulder and said, Looks like your little sister is following in your footsteps. Maybe you two will open a practice together someday. My mother overheard and laughed, saying, Oh, Samantha's still figuring things out. Emily's always known what she wants. I bit my tongue so hard it hurt. Visits home grew harder. Any achievement I mentioned was met with polite nods and quick changes of topic. When I was accepted into a competitive summer research program, my mother showed me Emily's latest Instagram posts, volunteering at a local clinic. She's already getting hands-on experience, my mother said proudly. The message was clear. Emily had natural talent, and I was just stubbornly pushing myself in the wrong direction. Thankfully, college gave me what home never did: real support. I found friends who shared my passion for medicine and didn't think my dedication was odd. I met professors who recognized my potential and encouraged me to aim higher. Most importantly, I met Dr. Catherine Reynolds, a skilled neurosurgeon who became my mentor in my junior year. She took me under her wing after I impressed her with a research paper on new surgical techniques. You have the mind of a surgeon, she told me during one of our monthly coffee meetings. Methodical, precise, and innovative. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. For the first time, I felt truly seen. Dr. Reynolds didn't just encourage my interest in surgery, she helped me prepare for it by inviting me to observe procedures, connecting me with professionals, and writing a recommendation letter for medical school that moved me to tears. You're not just going to be a doctor, Samantha, she said. You're going to be exceptional. I graduated summa cum laude with honors on my research thesis. The ceremony should have been one of my proudest moments. My parents attended but seemed uneasy, especially during the reception where professors praised my work. You must be very proud, my advisor told them. Samantha is one of the most promising students I've seen in 20 years. Yes, she's persistent, my father replied with a tight smile. Later that evening, during a family dinner, my accomplishments were quickly overshadowed by Emily's news that she'd been elected president of her pre-med society, a natural leader. My father raised his glass and toasted, always has been. I excused myself early, saying I was tired, but really I needed to leave before saying something I might regret. Lying in my childhood bed one of the last times, I realized the gap between me and my family was no longer just emotional. It was a fundamental difference in how we viewed the world and my place in it. The next day, I packed my car and left for medical school in New York. As I hugged my mother goodbye, she whispered, It's still not too late to change your mind. If it gets too hard, sweetheart. I pulled away and looked her in the eye. It already is too hard, Mom, but I'm doing it anyway. It was the closest I'd come to confrontation, and I saw surprise on her face. But old habits die hard, and by that evening, she called to tell me about a family friend's daughter, who had dropped out of medical school and was happier teaching high school biology. I let her words wash over me, no longer expecting anything different. The road ahead would be difficult enough without carrying their doubt. From that day on, I stopped seeking their approval and focused entirely on proving myself right. Medical school at Columbia was as demanding as everyone said, but just as rewarding. I thrived under pressure, fueled by genuine passion rather than mere ambition. In my first year, I found myself drawn to 𝑭𝒂𝒊𝒍𝒚. Surgery captivated me with its complexity and precision. During my residency at New York Presbyterian, I faced demanding 80-hour workweeks that tested every limit. I learned to grab sleep in short 15-minute intervals so I could perform complicated procedures and make critical life-or-death decisions, even when fatigue clouded my mind. Despite the exhaustion, there was a unique thrill I couldn't explain to anyone who hadn't experienced it, though I stopped trying to explain it to my family. Our phone calls had become brief and superficial, following the same routine. "How's the hospital?" my mother would ask, her tone hinting that she thought I was involved in some strange or worrisome activity. "Busy but good," I'd answer, no longer sharing specific achievements. "You're working too hard." She'd say, "You need a life outside medicine." "Samantha, have you met anyone special?" The unspoken message was always clear. My career should fit around traditional priorities like marriage and family, not the other way around. Meanwhile, Emily dropped out of medical school in her second year. The story my parents shared was that she had chosen a more balanced lifestyle to reconsider her priorities. The truth, something I learned through a mutual acquaintance, was that she had failed several key courses and was asked to repeat the year. My parents never mentioned her academic struggles, instead portraying her decision as thoughtful and self-aware. Not everyone can handle that kind of stress. My father told relatives at Thanksgiving, "Emily's smart enough to know what's best for her." When my aunt asked how I was doing in residency, my mother interrupted before I could respond. "Samantha's still plugging away," she said with a sigh, a mixture of doubt and martyrdom. "We worry about her. She's always been intense." I excused myself to help in the kitchen but overheard my father add, "The medical field has a high burnout rate. We just hope she doesn't push herself too far or realize it's not the right fit." What hurt most wasn't their lack of confidence, I had grown used to that, but how they actively undermined my reputation within the extended family and social circles. Through cousins and family friends, I found out they often described me as struggling and overwhelmed. When I received a prestigious residency award, they never mentioned it to anyone. When I was chosen for a specialized surgical fellowship, they told relatives I was still in school. My Aunt Margaret, my father's sister, and the family's honest voice, pulled me aside at Christmas and said bluntly, "They're telling everyone you're barely hanging on." Richard told the Petersons, "You're considering a less demanding specialty because you can't handle the pressure." "Is that true?" "Absolutely not," I replied, feeling the familiar sting of anger and hurt. "I'm excelling." My attending physicians recommended me for advanced training in minimally invasive techniques. Margaret studied my face and said, "I thought so. Your parents have always had a strange blind spot when it comes to you, Samantha. I don't understand it, but not everyone in this family shares their view." Her words offered some comfort, but they couldn't erase the pain of knowing my own parents were damaging my reputation. After that holiday, I made a hard decision. I would stop sharing any career news with my family. The pain of having my accomplishments dismissed was bad enough. Knowing they were twisted into failures was unbearable. I devoted all my energy to my work instead. In my third year of residency, I contributed to a groundbreaking procedure that combined traditional surgery with new imaging technology. The lead surgeon invited me to co-author a paper for the Journal of Cardiothoracic Surgery, my first major publication in a respected medical journal. When the article was published, my hospital held a small reception to celebrate. Colleagues and mentors congratulated me, recognizing how significant this was for someone at my career stage. Dr. Reynolds, who had kept in touch throughout my training, sent flowers with a card that read, "The first of many. You're on your way." My parents did not attend the reception. I hadn't invited them. When I mentioned the publication during a monthly phone call, my mother replied, "That's nice. Dear, did I tell you Emily started her own wellness blog? She already has 500 followers." I began distancing myself from family gatherings, using work and hospital duties as excuses. The truth was, I couldn't endure the hours of subtle jabs and comparisons. Every interaction left me drained and questioning myself, emotions I couldn't afford in such a demanding career. "You're never around anymore," my mother complained during a phone call. "Family should come first." "Samantha," I wanted to ask when I had ever come first in their family, but I held back. "I'm building my career, Mom. It takes sacrifice," she replied. "Well, Emily manages to visit every Sunday for dinner and runs her business." Emily's business was a part-time job at a wellness center, supported by an allowance from our parents. I bit my tongue again. The irony was that while my family expected me to fail, my professional reputation was growing. Attending physicians requested me for complex cases, and fellows and residents sought my guidance. By the final year of my fellowship, multiple hospitals were offering me prestigious positions. I learned to create my own family of colleagues and friends who understood my passion and respected my dedication. I found mentors who challenged me and peers who celebrated my achievements without reservation. It wasn't the validation I once sought from my parents, but it was genuine, rooted in my true abilities rather than their limited expectations. In quiet moments after successful surgeries or professional recognition, I sometimes found myself wishing my family could truly see who I had become, rather than the person they had decided I was. That wish was about to be fulfilled in a way I never expected. By my early 30s, I had established myself as a rising star in cardiothoracic surgery on the East Coast. My focus on minimally invasive techniques earned me respect from industry leaders, and I developed several procedural innovations, now adopted by surgeons nationwide. What no one in my family knew was that Massachusetts General Hospital had approached me with an extraordinary offer, the position of Chief of Surgery. At 34, I would be among the youngest to hold this role and one of the few women. The recruitment process was intense and confidential. I traveled to Boston for interviews, shared my vision for the department, and met the hospital board. Throughout, I kept everything from my family. Years of having my achievements diminished had taught me to protect my professional life from their influence. When the official offer arrived, I was alone in my apartment overlooking Central Park. The email was followed by a phone call from the hospital director. "We believe you are the future of surgical medicine, Dr. Mitchell," he said. "We want you to lead our team into that future." After accepting, I sat on my balcony with a glass of champagne, watching the sunset. I had accomplished something remarkable and undeniable. Part of me wanted to call my parents to force them to recognize my success, but a deeper wisdom held me back. This moment was mine to enjoy, untouched by their doubt or dismissal. I decided to wait until I was settled before sharing the news, intending to tell them in person when my achievement was already a fact, not just a promise. Before I could make those plans, however, my family staged one final act of dismissal that confirmed my decision to keep my success private. My parents had arranged a family dinner to celebrate Emily's engagement to a wealthy real estate developer. I flew in for the weekend, genuinely happy for my sister despite our complicated relationship. The dinner was held at an upscale restaurant, with extended family and friends gathered to toast the couple. I arrived a little late due to a delayed flight and found the celebration already underway. My father was mid-speech, champagne raised. "We always knew Emily would find someone special," he said. "She's always had a gift for connecting with people, for knowing what she wants and going after it." I slipped into my seat, quietly, greeting relatives as he continued, "Emily and James, you make us prouder than words can express." After the toast, my mother finally noticed me. "Oh, Samantha, you made it. We were just about to order." There was no mention of my late arrival or concern about the flight, just the usual feeling of being an afterthought. Throughout dinner, Emily dominated the conversation with wedding plans and stories about meeting James. My parents beamed at every detail, occasionally telling guests she's always had a clear vision for her life. When a cousin asked what I'd been up to, my mother answered before I could, "Samantha's still at the hospital in New York, working those crazy hours." She shook her head slightly. "We keep telling her there's more to life than work, don't we, Richard?" My father agreed with a pointed glance at Emily's engagement ring. Better late than never. I felt something break inside. Final thread snapping. Here I was offered one of the most prestigious positions in my field, a role many surgeons twice my age would consider the peak of their careers. Yet I was patronized as someone still trying to find her path. Actually, I started to speak, the announcement of my new position on the tip of my tongue. But Emily chose that moment to stand and tap her glass. "James and I have one more piece of news," she said. "We're expecting. I'm going to be a mom." The table erupted with cheers and congratulations. My mother burst into tears of joy, and my father wrapped his arm around Emily, pride shining from every pore. In the commotion, no one noticed I hadn't finished my sentence. No one cared about the news I might have shared. At that moment, I made my decision. They would learn of my achievement only when they could no longer ignore or diminish it. The next morning, as I prepared to return to New York, my mother cornered me in the guest room. "You should learn from your sister, Samantha," she said, folding a towel that didn't need folding. "Emily understands what really matters in life. It's not too late for you to focus on building a family instead of just a career." I looked at her, the woman who had never truly seen me, and felt a strange sense of peace. "I'm very happy with my life, Mom," I said simply. "Are you? You work all the time, barely visit, and you don't have a partner or children. That's not much of a life." I picked up my suitcase. "It's my life, and it's a good one." She shook her head, disappointment settling on her face. "We just want what's best for you." "No," I replied quietly. "You want what you think is best for me. There's a difference." After returning to New York, I left for the airport to prepare for my move to Boston. 2 weeks later, I began my role as Chief of Surgery at Massachusetts General Hospital. The hospital hosted a reception in my honor, attended by many respected medical professionals. My office overlooked the Charles River, and my door displayed my name and title in elegant lettering. I chose not to share any pictures or announcements with my family. This accomplishment remained mine alone, protected from their tendency to diminish it. I planned to tell them when the timing felt right. However, the moment would arrive unexpectedly under circumstances I couldn't have anticipated. While in the middle of a department budget meeting, my assistant urgently knocked on the door. "Dr. Mitchell, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's an emergency call for you," she said. "It's about your sister." My heart sank as I excused myself and took the call in the hallway. I heard my mother's panicked voice. Emily had collapsed at home and was being taken to Massachusetts General by ambulance. The irony wasn't lost on me. Out of all the hospitals in Boston, my sister was being brought to mine. I reassured my mother I would meet them there and rushed to the emergency department. By the time I arrived, Emily had been admitted and transferred to the high-risk obstetrics floor. Reviewing her records, I saw she was being treated for severe preeclampsia, serious but manageable condition if detected early. Relief washed over me. The situation was serious but not immediately life-threatening. I approached her room in professional attire. Without my white coat or badge, I heard my mother's voice through the partly open door, expressing frustration over the wait and saying the doctor should have been there by now. Taking a deep breath, I entered the room. Emily lay in the hospital bed, pale but stable. My father stood by the window, while my mother sat at Emily's bedside holding her hand. They all looked up as I entered but offered only mild acknowledgement, no relief or gratitude for my swift arrival. My mother finally spoke. "Have you talked to the doctors? Do you know what's happening?" I replied. "I just got here." "Mom," moving to Emily's side, "how are you feeling?" Emily sighed dramatically. "Terrible," they said. "My blood pressure is dangerously high, and they're worried about the baby." I nodded. "Preeclampsia can be serious, but you're in the right place. Massachusetts General has an excellent maternal-fetal medicine team." My father turned from the window with a frown. "How would you know? You work in New York." It was the perfect moment to explain my new position, but something held me back. Old patterns of dismissal and doubt resurfaced, even during a crisis. "I keep up with hospital rankings," I said simply, deciding this wasn't the time for revelations. Emily's health was the priority. My mother made a disapproving sound. "Well, I hope they send someone experienced to care for Emily. She needs the best possible care." I responded, "I'm sure they will send someone very qualified," suppressing the urge to remind her that as chief of surgery, I could ensure it myself. The next hour passed in uneasy silence, broken only by Emily's occasional complaints and my mother's fussing. When I offered to gather more details about the treatment plan, my father waved me off. "The doctor will be here soon. We don't need you running around asking questions and getting in the way." I sat quietly in the corner, observing the family dynamics from a distance. Even here, during a medical emergency and at a hospital where I held the highest surgical rank, I remained an outsider. The irony was striking. My mother continued to make pointed remarks about how some people are too focused on work to prioritize family, even as I sat right there having dropped everything to be with them. My father repeatedly checked his watch, muttering about staff inefficiencies. Emily shifted between tearful worries about the baby and complaints about the uncomfortable bed and bland hospital food. Not once did anyone inquire about my life or work or show genuine appreciation that I was there. I was expected to be present but invisible, supportive but silent. As the afternoon went on, my father stepped out to make business calls. My mother leaned closer to Emily and whispered, "Maybe this will help Samantha see what she's missing, all that focus on career. And look at what really matters in the end, family." I remained silent as Emily nodded in agreement, both seemingly forgetting that my career was dedicated to saving lives, including potentially Emily's and her baby's. The tension in the room was thick when a nurse finally entered, carrying a tablet and checking Emily's vital signs. She glanced up and recognized me, her eyes widening. I shook my head slightly, silently asking her to keep my presence discreet. The nurse turned back to Emily. "The attending physician will be here shortly to discuss your treatment plan. We're closely monitoring your blood pressure, and so far, the baby's heartbeat remains strong." "It's about time," my mother huffed. "We've been waiting for hours." Actually, it had been about 70 minutes since Emily's admission. The nurse remained calm, aware that patience was essential. "Dr. Bennett is one of our top maternal-fetal specialists," my mother said, sniffing dismissively. I remained silent, watching quietly as a calm settled over me, preparing for the inevitable moment when my professional life would collide with my family's perception of me. That moment arrived sooner than any of us expected. The door to Emily's hospital room swung open, and Nurse Jackson returned, this time accompanied by a young resident I recognized as Dr. Patel from the obstetrics department. They were reviewing Emily's chart when Nurse Jackson noticed me again. What followed felt almost slow motion. The nurse straightened, a look of professional respect replacing her earlier casual attitude. She stepped away from Emily's bed and approached me, stopping at a respectful distance. Then, to everyone's surprise, she gave a slight, respectful bow. "Hello, Chief of Surgery," she said clearly. "I didn't realize you were already here with the patient. Dr. Bennett is on her way to consult." The silence that followed was heavy. I could almost hear the mental processing as my family tried to understand what they had just heard. Emily's mouth fell open in genuine shock, her usual dramatics replaced by surprise. My father, having just returned from his calls, froze in the doorway, phone still in hand. My mother's eyes shifted from the nurse to me, her face changing from confusion to disbelief. "There must be some mistake," she finally said, nervously laughing. My Daughter works at a hospital in New York. She can't be, my father added. Nurse Jackson looked confused but replied firmly. Dr. Samantha Mitchell has been our chief of surgery for the past 3 months. Adding that I was one of the youngest chiefs in the hospital's history. All eyes turned to me. I stood slowly, smoothing my silk blouse. Thank you, Nurse Jackson, I said calmly. Yes, I am familiar with the case. Dr. Bennett is exactly who my sister needs to see right now. The nurse nodded professionally, though I could see questions in her eyes. Dr. Patel looked equally puzzled but remained composed. We'll continue monitoring Mrs. Collins's blood pressure, he said, using Emily's married name. The latest readings show it's still elevated but somewhat stabilized since admission. Good, I replied. Please keep me updated on any changes. As the medical team refocused on Emily, I observed my family's reactions. Emily's shock shifted into a complex mix of surprise, confusion, and what seemed like betrayal, as if my success was an attack on her. My father moved beside my mother, his expression hardening defensively. My mother simply stared at me as if I were a stranger. Chief of surgery, she whispered finally. But you never said anything. Would it have mattered if I had? I asked quietly before she could answer. The door opened again, and Dr. Bennett entered. She was one of the hospital's most respected specialists, a woman in her 50s with a commanding presence and strong clinical skills. She spotted me immediately. Dr. Mitchell, she said warmly. I didn't expect to see you here today. Family emergency, I explained. This is my sister, Emily Collins. Dr. Bennett's eyebrows lifted slightly as she made the connection. I see. Well, she's in good hands. She turned to Emily with a reassuring smile. Mrs. Collins, I've reviewed your case. The preeclampsia is concerning but manageable. We'll need to keep you hospitalized for monitoring until your blood pressure stabilizes. Emily, still processing the news about my position, simply nodded. Dr. Mitchell, Dr. Bennett addressed me professionally. Based on the initial assessment, we're considering starting magnesium sulfate as a precaution against seizures, given your sister's condition. Do you agree? The room seemed to hold its breath as Dr. Bennett deferred to my medical opinion, an unmistakable recognition of my expertise. Yes, I replied after a moment. That seems appropriate given the severity of her symptoms. I'd also suggest continuous fetal monitoring for at least the next 24 hours. Dr. Bennett nodded. Exactly what I was thinking. I'll order that immediately. My father finally spoke up. Wait just a minute. Are you saying my daughter is making medical decisions about her sister? Isn't that a conflict of interest? Dr. Bennett looked surprised. Mr. Mitchell, your daughter is one of the most respected surgeons in the country. While obstetrics is not her specialty, her medical opinion is highly valued. However, I am the attending physician and will make all final treatment decisions. She then turned to me. Will you be staying for the treatment discussion? Yes, I said, meeting my father's gaze steadily. I want to hear the full plan. As Dr. Bennett explained Emily's treatment in detail, other hospital staff came and went, each acknowledging me respectfully as Dr. Mitchell or Chief, confirming my professional standing in that space. My mother, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly reached out and took my hand. Why didn't you tell us? She asked softly. I gently withdrew my hand. When have you ever truly wanted to hear about my success? Mom. Her face flushed. With embarrassment. That's not fair. We've always supported you. From the hospital bed, Emily let out a scoff, drawing everyone's attention. Oh, come on, she said, some of her usual dramatics creeping back in. We all know Samantha was never the favorite. You made that pretty clear. My father stepped forward, his businessman instincts kicking in to try to smooth things over. Now is not the time for family drama. Emily, you need to focus on getting better. Then, turning to me with a stiff smile, he added, Samantha, we've always been proud of you. We just worried you were working too hard. The practiced ease of his revisionist history was almost impressive. In any other situation, I might have let it slide, accepting this small gesture for the sake of peace. But standing in my hospital, surrounded by colleagues who respected me for the very qualities my family had dismissed, I no longer felt the need to compromise. No, I said simply. You weren't proud of me. You were waiting for me to fail. Dr. Bennett, sensing the tension, tactfully excused herself. I'll check back in an hour. The nurse will start the magnesium sulfate immediately. As the door closed behind her, my father's facade cracked. That's ridiculous. We always supported your interests. My interests, I repeated, my voice steady. You mean my career, the one you told everyone was falling apart? The one Mom suggested I abandon? Just yesterday to focus on starting a family? My mother looked down, clearly embarrassed. We didn't know you were so successful. That's exactly the point, I said. You never asked. You never wanted to know. You decided years ago who I was and what I could do on. You never updated that view, even when the evidence was right in front of you. Emily, never one to stay out of the spotlight for long, interrupted. Well, you could have told us you were some big shot doctor. It's not like we wouldn't have been happy for you. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and felt an unexpected wave of compassion. Emily had been shaped by our parents' expectations just as much as I had, though in the opposite way. She was told she was exceptional, so she never had to prove it. I wondered what she might have achieved if held to higher standards. I'm not some big-shot doctor, I said quietly. I'm chief of surgery at one of the country's top hospitals. I've published over 30 papers in major medical journals. I've developed surgical techniques taught across the nation. And none of you know any of that because none of you ever truly wanted to know who I really am. A profound silence followed. My father stared out the window, jaw clenched. My mother twisted her wedding ring, tears welling in her eyes. Emily looked down at her hospital blanket, unusually subdued. The moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. Dr. Patel returned with a nurse to begin Emily's treatment. As they prepared the magnesium sulfate, I stepped back and watched my family process what had just happened. Standing in my hospital, watching my colleagues care for my sister, I realized I had finally become what I promised myself under the stars. All those years ago I had become undeniable that Emily stayed in the hospital for 5 days. Her condition stabilized, the baby was healthy, and she was eventually discharged with instructions for careful monitoring through the rest of her pregnancy. During her stay, I visited daily, balancing my role as chief of surgery with that of a concerned sister. The revelation of my position shifted our family dynamics. Surprisingly, Emily adapted first. On the 3rd day of her hospitalization, while I checked in during lunch, she looked up from her magazine with unusual seriousness. "You must be really good," she said simply. "Everyone here practically genuflexed when you walk in." I smiled faintly. "I work hard." "Yeah," she replied, studying me. "You always did." She hesitated, then added, "I was jealous. Of you." Her words caught me off guard. "Jealous of me? Mom and Dad treated you like you hung the moon." Emily laughed, but without humor. "They did, and that was nice, I guess. But I always knew I wasn't earning it. You built something real, something they couldn't give you or take away." She rubbed her pregnant belly absently. "I never had that. It was perhaps the most honest conversation we'd ever had. Emily's discharge approached. We began tentatively rebuilding our relationship not as competitors for our parents' approval but as adults, with our own strengths and weaknesses. My parents' adjustment was more complicated. My father tried to rewrite history, claiming he had always believed in me but pushed me to excel through doubt. My mother oscillated between pride in my achievements and hurt over the secrets I kept. "We're your family," she said during a private moment in my office. "Families shouldn't have secrets. Families shouldn't make their children feel like they're always falling short." I replied gently, "Every time I achieved something, you found a way to diminish it." Eventually, I stopped sharing. Because it hurt too much, I stopped sharing. "We never meant to hurt you," my mother insisted, tears welling in her eyes. "We were just worried. Medicine is such a demanding field, and you are always so intense. That intensity is what makes me good at my job." "Mom," I said gently, "it's not a flaw to be corrected, but a strength to be channeled." She nodded slowly, though I wasn't sure she truly understood. Old perceptions die hard, and my parents had spent decades viewing me through a particular lens. It would take time and consistent evidence to reshape their image of me. As the weeks passed, I established clear boundaries. I declined their initial flood of invitations to family events, explaining that my schedule as chief of surgery was demanding and inflexible. When I did accept an invitation to Sunday dinner, about a month after Emily's hospitalization, I left early when my father introduced me to the neighbors as our daughter, the doctor, with the same tone he might have used for our daughter, the circus performer, technically accurate, but tinged with subtle disbelief. "I've worked hard to earn my position and the respect that comes with it," I explained, collecting my coat. "When you're ready to respect it too, we can try this again." The next day my Aunt Margaret called. "Good for you," she said without preamble. "Richard's been getting away with that condescending attitude for years. It's about time someone called him on it." Gradually, tentatively, a new family dynamic began to emerge. My parents learned that my success wasn't a phase or a fluke, but a sustainable reality. Emily, to everyone's surprise, including possibly her aunt, developed a genuine interest in patient advocacy after her experience. 6 months after the incident, she began volunteering at a support group for high-risk pregnant women. 6 months later, I invited my family to the hospital's annual fundraising gala. I was being honored for pioneering a new minimally invasive cardiac procedure, and I decided it was time for them to see me in my professional element. The evening was transformative. My parents watched as hospital board members, renowned physicians, and grateful patients approached me with genuine respect and admiration. They listened as the hospital director described my contributions to the field. They witnessed perhaps for the first time who I had become when they weren't looking. I had no idea. My father said quietly as we stood at the reception afterward, "The way people talk about you, you're really changing lives." "That's why I do it, Dad," I replied. "It was never about proving anything to anyone. It was about being who I was meant to be." He nodded, a complexity of emotions crossing his face. "I'm sorry we didn't see it sooner. It wasn't a complete transformation. Decades of patterns don't disappear overnight, but it was a start. Over the following year, we began building a relationship based on who we actually were, not who they had decided I should be. I established a mentoring program for young surgeons facing similar challenges, particularly women and minorities, who often struggled against limited perceptions of their potential. I shared my story openly with these protégés, emphasizing that external validation, even from those closest to us, can never replace self-belief. Your worth isn't determined by others' ability to see it. I told a particularly promising resident who was facing skepticism from her family, build your excellence brick by brick, day by day. Eventually, it becomes undeniable even to those most committed to denying it. The greatest freedom I discovered came not from finally receiving my family's approval, but from no longer needing it. My confidence was built on a foundation of genuine achievement and impact on others' perceptions. The little girl who once desperately sought validation had grown into a woman who created her own. Emily delivered a healthy baby boy 3 months after her hospitalization. At the family gathering to welcome him, she pulled me aside. I want him to know his Aunt Samantha, she said, the baby sleeping peacefully in her arms. I want him to know what it means to find your path and stick to it no matter what anyone says. I looked down at my nephew's tiny face. I'd like that. Maybe someday, she added with a small smile. You can explain to him what a cardiothoracic surgeon actually does, because I still have no idea. I laughed, a genuine laugh, free from the tension that had characterized our relationship for so long. It's a date. My journey from dismissed daughter to respected chief of surgery taught me that true validation can only come from within. External recognition, while satisfying, especially in those moments when my family finally saw me clearly, is ultimately fleeting. What endures is the knowledge that I built something meaningful, something that extends beyond myself to touch countless lives. If you're watching this and feel unrecognized or underestimated by those who should believe in you most, know that your worth isn't diminished by their inability to see it. Build your excellence quietly if necessary, but build it nonetheless. Your success doesn't need their permission or acknowledgement to be real. The greatest revenge against doubt isn't proving others wrong. It's proving yourself right. Have you ever been underestimated by family or friends? How did you respond? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it today. Remember, sometimes the people who are meant to support us the most are the last to recognize our potential. Don't let that stop you from becoming exactly who you're meant to be. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the strength to pursue your dreams even when no one else believes in you.